This chapter in Matthew contains what is popularly called the Sermon on the Mount. There's other names for it. Have you ever heard of the beatitudes?
Yeah.
Okay, called the beatitudes. Or it's called supreme blessedness. Is the meaning, really. Now, it's been taught by most Christian preachers that this chapter elevates the word of Elohim far above what the law did. Far above and beyond the law. Well, they could not be more wrong. The teaching here is merely a discourse on the Torah. That's all it is. It's a discourse on his instructions. That'll be very evident when we see the source of these words of Yeshua. Let's look at Matthew 5, the first 3 verses. And when he saw the multitudes, he went up on the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And opening his mouth, he began to teach them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, the kingdom of heaven, that's a difficult thing for some people to define also. But it's very simple. It's simply the redeemed land of Israel. That's what the kingdom of heaven is. The redeemed land of Israel. Now, that land is being redeemed right now. It's being redeemed. It's not through being redeemed, but that's happening.
If you have a good spirit.
Okay, I'm going to get to that.
I mean, poor spirit kind of means you're depressed.
No, Tom, I'm going to get to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who are the poor in spirit? See, that's some people. That's difficult, but it's not. It's very simple. It's those who are humble. Okay, those who are humble is what that's referring to. Those that are humble will inherit the kingdom of heaven or the redeemed land of Israel. Look in Leviticus 26, starting at verse 41. I was also acting with hostility against them to bring them into the land of our enemies. Or if their uncircumcised heart becomes humbled, so that they make amends for their iniquity, I'll remember my covenant with Jacob. I'll remember also my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham as well. And I'll remember the land. What was the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? The land. If they do what? Humble themselves, they will inherit the kingdom of heaven. That's what he's saying. He's just saying Leviticus 26, 41, and 42. Also,
You can be humble and not go in if his law, statutes, commandments, and ordinances, do you?
no, you can't.
I've seen humble people that were out in left field.
Well, if they're humble, they'll be obedient to him and not to their own desires.
You humble yourself
Yep.
once a year for a day of atonement.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about.
Deuteronomy 8, starting at verse 2, and you shall remember all the way which Yahweh your Elohim has led you in the wilderness these 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you, and let you be hungry, and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh. He humbled them before what? Before they went into that land to possess it, the kingdom of heaven. Deuteronomy 8, starting at verse 6. And that, we're just reading on down here. We skipped a couple verses, and we're going down to verse 6. Therefore you shall keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Yahweh your Elohim is bringing you into a good land. It's the kingdom of heaven. A land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs flowing forth in valleys and hills. A land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates. A land of olive oil and honey. A land where you shall eat food without scarcity, in which you shall not lack anything. A land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper. Okay, so blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those that are humble, for they'll inherit the land of Israel. Look at the next verse. Verse 4 of Matthew 5. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. You know, we all mourn when we lose a loved one, but that's not what this passage is referring to. Okay, that's not what it's referring to. This is referring to mourning over one's disobedience to Elohim. Okay? Isaiah 51, verses 11 and 12. So the ransomed of Yahweh will return and come with joyful shouting to Zion. And everlasting joy will be on their heads, and they'll obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. I, even I, am he who comforts you. Who are you that you are afraid of a man who dies, and of the Son of Man who is made like grass? Look at Isaiah 57, starting at verse 15. For thus says the high and exalted one who lives forever, whose name is holy, I dwell on a high and holy place, and also with the contrite and lowly of spirit, humble, in order to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive the heart of the contrite. Those are mourning over their sins. For I will not contend forever, neither will I always be angry. For the spirit would grow faint before me, and the breath of those whom I have made. Because of the iniquity of his unjust gain, I was angry and struck him. I hid my face and was angry, and he went on turning away in the way of his heart. I've seen his ways, but I'll heal him. I'll lead him and restore comfort to him and to his mourners. Isaiah 61, starting at verse 2, to proclaim the favorable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, giving them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a spirit of fainting. So they'll be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of Yahweh, that he may be glorified. It says, blessed are those who mourn over their iniquity, for they shall be comforted. It says also in Zechariah, and we're not going to go there, but it says, and then they'll look to the skies, I'm paraphrasing here, and they'll look upon him whom they've pierced. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn over their iniquity. And they'll be comforted. Verse 5. Blessed are the gentle, for they shall inherit the earth. You know, this really shouldn't say blessed are the gentle. The Greek word for gentle, humble. Are you getting the feeling that this humility thing, this humble thing, is very, very, very important? Okay, pride needs to go swallow it. Okay, humble, meek. And that word for earth, she'll inherit the earth. That's the land, is what that means. Okay? That word, that's so gay. It's, blessed are the humble, for they shall inherit the land. In Psalm 37, verse 11, but the humble will inherit the land, and they delight themselves in abundant prosperity. Why, I think Yeshua was plagiarizing. Wasn't he? See, none of this he says is original. And people think it's, well, he's elevating the message of God. No, he's not. He's just telling it like it is. Psalm 37, verse 9 says, for the evildoers will be cut off, but those who wait for Yahweh, they'll inherit the land. Verse 22 of Psalm 37, for those blessed by him will inherit the land, but those cursed by him will be cut off. And verse 29, the righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. The righteous being humble. Psalm 37, verse 34, wait for Yahweh and keep his way, and he'll exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you will see it. Let's look at verse 6 of Matthew 5. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. He's quoting the Tanakh, and I think you're getting the hint by now. In Psalm 107, verses 8 and 9, let them give thanks to Yahweh for his loving kindness, for his wonders to the sons of men. For he has satisfied the thirsty soul, and the hungry soul he has filled with what is good. Isaiah 55, starting at verse 1. Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why do you spend money for what is not bread, and your wages for what does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and delight yourself in abundance. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen, you may live, and I'll make an everlasting covenant with you according to the faithful mercies shown to David. You know, when he talks about waters, what's water represent again in Scripture? Running water. Spirit of the Father. Wine is joy. Milk and bread, that's what we live by. Okay? He says, what does he say? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Elohim. Yeshua said it. Moses said it. That's what he's saying here. Let's look at verse 7. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. We are to be merciful to others, and we will receive the mercy of the Father. If you're not merciful to others, don't expect him to grant his mercy. If you're not forgiving of others, as he said when they asked him to teach us how to pray, if you don't forgive others, don't expect forgiveness. Okay? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Psalm 41, starting at verse 1, how blessed is he who considers the helpless. Yahweh will deliver him in a day of trouble. Yahweh will protect him and keep him alive. He shall be called blessed upon the earth. Do not give him over to the desire of his enemies. Yahweh will sustain him upon his sickbed in his illness. You do restore him to health. As for me, I said, O Yahweh, be gracious to me. Heal my soul, for I have sinned against you. Proverbs 19, verse 17, he who is gracious to a poor man lends to Yahweh, and he will repay him for his good deed. Very important. Verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see Elohim. You can see there, katharos is in Greek, it actually means clean. Blessed are the clean in heart. This is a quote from the Tanakh once again. Psalm 51, starting at verse 10, create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence. Do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will be converted to you. We read in Ezekiel 36, verse 25, then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you'll be clean. I'll cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I'll give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I'll remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I'll put my spirit, my breath within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. You'll be careful to observe my ordinances. Blessed are the clean in heart. Psalm 24, starting at verse 4. He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to falsehood, and has not sworn deceitfully, he shall receive a blessing from Yahweh and righteousness from the Elohim of his salvation. This is the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face, even Jacob, Selah. Let's go to Matthew 5 again. Verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of Elohim. Blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called the sons of Elohim. You know what this is saying? It's saying, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? That's what he's saying. Leviticus 19, verse 18, you shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people. But you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. 1 John 3, verse 10 says, by this the children of Elohim and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of Elohim, nor the one who does not love his brother. You know, it's great. It's been great to teach Torah for many years, and a lot of people have seen Scripture for what it is, and they don't work on the Sabbath day, and they don't eat poison anymore. But you know what? If you don't love your brother, you may as well have a ham sandwich. Okay? And get that lawnmower out on Saturday. You might as well. If you don't love your brother, it's all for naught. Now,
Is that the chosen people?
yes, chosen people. And it's just, I don't know. It's just something that everyone can get better at. That is one thing we can all get better at. We can, you can only rest so much on the Sabbath. Okay? Okay, well, I slept all day. I didn't break Sabbath. Well, okay, well, you did good. You can't honor the Sabbath any better than that, okay? I do not eat unclean things. And do everything you can to avoid eating unclean things. And people go to greater lengths than others to make sure. But you can quit eating unclean things. Okay, I'm there. Okay? But when it comes to loving your brother, we need to work on that. We can always do better at that. You know, the disciples asked Yeshua and Luke, they said, increase our faithfulness. They say faith. It's supposed to be faithfulness. Well, it's faithfulness to his Torah. And he goes into an account about how to love your brother. That's how you increase. You want to increase your faithfulness to the Father? Do you want to increase in that? Love your brother more. Do more to love your brother. And I don't mean look at him and get tears in your eyes. And, oh, I missed you. No, sappy Christian nonsense. Okay? I'm serious about accepting, helping, assisting. Be there for them. And there's times when we really, really, really need each other, you know? We can get better. We read in 1 John 4, starting at verse 21. And this commandment we have from him, that the one who loves Elohim should love his brother also. Going on to chapter 5, whoever believes that Yeshua is the Messiah is born of Elohim. Whoever loves the Father loves the child born of him. By this we know that we love the children of Elohim, when we love Elohim and observe his commandments. For this is the love of Elohim, that we keep his commandments, and they're not burdensome. And loving your brother should not be burdensome. Verse 10 of Matthew 5. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know, with keeping righteousness comes a certain amount of persecution. Keep in mind the definition of righteousness, okay? I know as a Christian, the term righteousness, well, I'll never achieve righteousness. Only Jesus was righteous, right? No. The definition of righteousness is given to us in Deuteronomy. It's Deuteronomy 6:25, and it will be righteousness for us if we're careful to observe all this commandment before Yahweh our Elohim, just as he commanded us. Okay? That's righteousness for us, to obey all his Torah. That's righteousness. Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the redeemed land of Israel. John tells us if we practice righteousness, we are born of him and were just as righteous as Messiah is righteous. 1 John 2, verse 29, if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone also who practices righteousness is born of him. 1 John 3, verses 6 and 7. No one who abides in him sins. No one who sins has seen him or knows him. He's talking about what your practice is. I'm not saying perfection. He's not saying perfection here. What's your practice? What's your desire? What's your goal? Little children, let no one deceive you. The one who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. Any questions so far? Matthew 5, verses 11 and 12. Blessed are you when men cast insults at you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The prophets were virtually all persecuted and suffered greatly for their righteousness. Yeshua says that by keeping Torah, the reward will be great. We read in Psalm...
Can I simply go on?
Go ahead.
It's okay to stand up for what you believe in when people are persecuting you because you're trying to do what Elohim wants you to do, right?
Well, what do you mean stand up for yourself?
Well, you're not being humble if you say, well, it's just the way it is, and I don't care what you guys do, you know what I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean...
You're not being humble, you know what I mean?
Well, the fact is, if you're being righteous in this world, there's going to be some persecution. All right? Some of it's just you're talking about a matter of playground persecution. Ignore it. It's not your problem. That's the majority of what we find. No big deal. Psalm 19, starting at verse 7, the Torah of Yahweh is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimony of Yahweh is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of Yahweh are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of Yahweh is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of Yahweh is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of Yahweh are true, they are righteous altogether. They're more desirable than gold, yes, and much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them your servant is warned, in keeping them there is great reward. Psalm 58, verse 11. And men will say, surely there is reward for the righteous. Surely there is a Elohim who judges the earth. Proverbs 11, verses 18 and 19. The wicked earns deceptive wages, but he who sows righteousness gets a true reward. He who is steadfast in righteousness will attain to life, and he who pursues evil will bring about his own death. So, once again, as you can see, all these things, they come right from the Tanakh. Verse 13 of Matthew 5. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how will it be made salty again? It's good for nothing anymore except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You know, Yeshua says we're the salt of the earth. What does that mean? For the answer to this, let's look at the offerings made to Elohim. Leaven and honey were forbidden in the offerings, and salt was commanded in the offerings. Leviticus 2, starting at verse 11, says, no grain offering which you bring to Yahweh shall be made with leaven. You shall not offer up in smoke any leaven or any honey as an offering by fire to Yahweh. As an offering of first fruits you shall bring them to Yahweh, but they shall not ascend for a soothing aroma on the altar. Every grain offering of yours, moreover, you shall season with salt. So the salt of the covenant of your Elohim shall not be lacking from your grain offering. With all your offerings you shall offer salt. Now, leaven is a bacteria that corrupts, and honey is a sweetener that makes things taste more palatable to people. Elohim did not allow these corruptions of what is pleasing to man to be offered to him. On the other hand, salt is a preservative. Israel was instructed to put salt on all the offerings to demonstrate the covenant of salt, as he says here. The covenant of permanence. His people, that's what they have with him, is a permanent covenant. We are to be the salt of the earth by keeping and preserving his word. That's what's meant by that. And his word is what's given to us in Torah. Salt is a reference to keeping our covenant with him. Numbers 18, verse 19, all the offerings of the holy gifts which the sons of Israel offer to Yahweh, I have given to you and your sons and your daughters with you as a perpetual allotment. It is an everlasting covenant of salt before Yahweh to you and your descendants with you. Going back to the words of Yeshua, if salt loses its saltiness, say if it loses its purpose, then what good is it? It's good for nothing except to be thrown out and trampled by men. If you don't keep his word, if you don't keep his Torah, what good are you? That's what he's saying. Verse 13. There we are. You are the salt of the earth. Oh, I just read that. 14. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Yeshua says that those who are righteous are the light of the world. This comes straight from the Tanakh again. Isaiah 60, starting at verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of Yahweh has risen upon you. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and deep darkness the peoples. But Yahweh will rise upon you, and his glory will appear upon you. And nations will come to your light, and the kings to the brightness of your rising. You are the light of the world, a city set on a hill. And it can't be hidden. Proverbs 4, verse 18. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day. His word is the light for the path of his people. In Psalm 119, verse 105, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Isaiah 8, verse 20 says, to the Torah and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it's because they have no dawn. And it's interesting the way that's put. So, if they don't speak according to the Torah and according to the testimony, which would be the covenant, because that's the testimony of keeping the law, the Torah, that means they have no dawn. Now, what is it about dawn? Do any of you all get up early enough to see dawn? Okay, I'm sorry. Been a long time for me. But what is dawn? It's that first little glimmer of light, isn't it? Okay? That first little glimmer of light when the sun's coming up. If they don't speak according to the Torah and the testimony, they don't even have that little first glimmer of light in their lives, in what they say, and in what they do, if they don't keep the Torah. That's what he says, okay? That's what he says.
Where they live in darkness. And if you don't have any dawn, it means you're not ever going to get daylight.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct. Verses 15 and 16. Nor did man light a lamp and put it under the peck measure, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. We are to let our obedience to the Torah shine to others. Isaiah 58, verse 8, then your light will break out like the dawn, and your recovery will speedily spring forth, and your righteousness will go before you. The glory of Yahweh will be your rear guard. Psalm 37, starting at verse 3. Trust in Yahweh and do good. Dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Delight yourself in Yahweh, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to Yahweh, trust also in him, and he will do it. And he'll bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your judgment as the noonday. Matthew 5, verse 17. I love this passage. Do not think that I came to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. This is one of the most, of course, I say the most misunderstood passages in Christianity. I say it's one of the most. It made the top 1,000 of passages that Christianity misunderstands. I don't know where it is in that ranking, but there's 999 others that they totally do not understand. Have you heard people say, well, you tell them, well, the law wasn't abolished. Oh, no, it was fulfilled. There, it's fulfilled. And I don't have to do it, because he fulfilled it. You just don't believe Jesus fulfilled the law, do you? Well, gosh. He didn't come to abolish the law, but to abolish it is patently absurd. That's what they say. Well, he didn't come to abolish it, but to abolish it. It's ridiculous. Now let's look at the word fulfill. It's the Greek word plerou. It means to fill up. Okay? It means to fill up, to make full, fully preach. Fully preach is how it's translated. That's what it means. We read in Matthew 13, starting at verse 47, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet cast into the sea and gathering fish of every kind. And when it was filled, it's a Greek word, same word, plerou. They drew it up on the beach, and they sat down and gathered the good fish into the containers, but the bad they threw away. Let's look at another example of plerou. It never means abolish, do away with, denigrate, diminish. It means the opposite. In Matthew 23, verses 31 and 32, consequently you bear witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the guilt of your fathers. Greek word plerou, same word. Luke 2, verse 40, and the child continued to grow and become strong, increasing, Greek word plerou, in wisdom. And the grace of Elohim was upon him. Here we go in Romans 15, verse 19. And the power of signs and wonders and the power of the Spirit, so that from Jerusalem and round about as far as Illyricum I have fully preached, Greek word plerou, the gospel of Messiah. Never does it mean to diminish. It means the opposite. To elevate, to make replete. Okay? To make replete. What does that mean? To make full. And this word for abolish, actually, doesn't mean abolish either, like destroy. It means to, I didn't put it up there, but it means to really deplete. All right? He says, don't think that I came to deplete the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to deplete, but to make replete, but to fill it up. Not to drain it, but to fill it up, to make it full in your lives. Verse 18, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the Torah until all is accomplished. A jot or tittle refers to the smallest letter or mark that's written. Not one little mark of that Torah will pass away until heaven and earth pass away. We have there a portion of a Torah scroll from some 400 years old. If you want to look at the careful way they wrote these letters, at least 400 years ago, and they continued that for many, many centuries. Every little jot or tittle had to be just perfect. That's the way they did it. He said this in Luke also, by the way, in Luke 16, verse 17. But it's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one stroke of a letter of Torah to fail. So it can't fail. Yeshua is paraphrasing the Tanakh. Isaiah 51, starting at verse 6. Lift up your eyes to the sky, then look to the earth beneath, for the sky will vanish like smoke, and the earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants will die in like manner. But my salvation shall be forever, and my righteousness shall not wane. Listen to me, you who know righteousness, a people in whose heart is my Torah. Do not fear the reproach of man, neither be dismayed at their revilings, for the moth will eat them like a garment, and the grub will eat them like wool. But my righteousness shall be forever, my salvation to all generations. What's righteousness again? Being obedient to all his laws, commandments, statutes, and ordinances. He says that'll be forever. Psalm 102, starting in verse 25. Of old you did found the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. Even they will perish, but you do endure. All of them will wear out like a garment, like clothing. You'll change them, and they'll be changed. But you are the same, and your years do not come to an end. The Father and his Torah are never changing. They're permanent. They're forever. They're throughout all generations. Not changing, not different. We're the ones that change. Verse 19, whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments, and so teaches others, shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. You know, this passage is used by a lot of people to justify entrance into the kingdom, even though they ignore his Torah. You know, the passage says quite the opposite. The Greek preposition for in the passage can also be the word by. That changes things. That totally changes the power and meaning of that verse. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and so teaches others shall be called least by the kingdom of heaven. Whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great by the kingdom of heaven. That changes things a little bit. Deuteronomy 27, oh, there it is. Deuteronomy 27, verse 26, cursed is he who does not confirm the words of this Torah by doing them. All the people shall say, amen. I don't know how to argue with that one. I don't know how to argue with any of these. Psalm 119, verses 127 and 128. Therefore I love your commandments above gold, yes, above fine gold. Therefore I esteem right all your precepts concerning everything. I hate every false way. Deuteronomy 12:32. Whatever I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to nor take away from it. Elohim warned the leaders of Israel of this hundreds of years before. In Malachi 2, verses 8 and 9, we read, but as for you, you have turned aside from the way. You've caused many to stumble by the instruction. You've corrupted the covenant of Levi, says the Yahweh of hosts. So I also have made you despised and abased before all people, just as you are not keeping my ways, but are showing partiality in the instruction. You can't do away with the least of these commandments. Now, I don't know what the least is. Okay? I guess people, that's subjective. Some have greater punishments than others. Some, it's not even a punishment designated. But I say we don't do away with any of them. Verse 20 of Matthew 5. For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Yeshua was very clear about this. He said we are to be doers of righteousness. The scribes and Pharisees were teachers of the Torah in that day, but they were hopelessly corrupt, and they were power-hungry guys. Another popular misconception of Christianity is that the scribes and the Pharisees were very zealous for Torah and that they were obedient to it. That's not what Yeshua said. Yeshua, there's only one group of people he used the term hypocrites to. Now, can you think of something that is a worse thing to really be called than a hypocrite? Viper, yeah. Well, at least the viper can't help it. But the hypocrite, in Matthew 23, starting at verse 23, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Have you been told that by a Christian? Preachers have argued that with me. Oh, you just don't know. The Pharisees and the scribes, they were zealous for the Torah. That's what they were. They thought they were saved by the Torah. They were zealous for the Torah. They taught the people the Torah. And so, well, why did Yeshua call them hypocrites? I don't know. Well, I can tell you why. For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and you've neglected the weightier provisions of Torah, justice and mercy and faithfulness. See, faithfulness, very important. Very important. See, that's what people. You're not saved by your faith. People say, "Well, I'm saved by grace through my faith." It doesn't. Ephesians 2:8 doesn't say that. Okay, that's a Greek word pistis. It means faithfulness. You're saved by the graciousness of the Father through his faithfulness to keep his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? He's going to keep that covenant whether you like it or not. And if he's granted you his graciousness, that means you're chosen. And not by good works that you've done, lest any man should boast. But it's his faithfulness we're saved by. He says, you have neglected the weightier provisions of Torah, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. But these are things you should have done without neglecting the others. I find it interesting that he said, he tells them here, you tithe the mint and the dill and the cumin, the little spices, you tithe those things. But you neglect justice, mercy, and faithfulness. He said, but you need to do justice. You should, if you want to tithe all those things, good, you should. But don't neglect the important things. You blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Excuse me. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they're full of robbery and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you're like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but on the inside are full of dead man's bones and all uncleanness. Make no mistake, Yeshua is saying that our righteousness is to exceed those guys. Exceed that, or else you won't enter the kingdom. Fortunately, the bar's set pretty low. Okay? The bar's set pretty low. And once again, we trust in the faithfulness of the Father to give us the desire and the love for his word, to be obedient to it. Matthew 5, verse 21 and 22. You've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. And whoever shall say to his brother, Raka, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. Whoever shall say, in the Greek, moros, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. The passage in verse 21, where it says, whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court, that's not in the Tanakh. It was a tradition for hundreds of years. And you shall not commit murder is the fifth commandment. We know that, of the 10. Or is it 6? It's 6, isn't it? Is it 6? Well, it's 5 or 6. Okay. You know what it is. Yeshua speaks of murder. Then he speaks in progression of the feelings and reactions that lead to murder. He also includes a level of guiltiness to each one. He says if you're angry with your brother, you're guilty before the court. The Greek word for court is krisis, which means tribunal. He says if one calls his brother Raka, he'll be guilty before the Supreme Court. And Raka means stupid or empty-headed or fool. The Greek word for Supreme Court is Sanhedrin. Yeshua says whoever says you fool shall be guilty into the fiery hell. The Aramaic word for fool is moros, and more likely a transliteration of the Hebrew term which means rebel. This term is used by Moses of Israel when his disobedience prevented him from entering the promised land. Now, to call someone you fool is not to say that person is not only to say that person is rebellious, as in disobedient to Elohim, but is saying that person does not believe there is an Elohim and hates the Torah. See, this is brought out in, you see here in Numbers 20, verse 10, Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock, and he said to them, "Listen now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock?" And this is where he struck the rock when he shouldn't have.
Yeah, that's where he lost his passage into the
Yeah, yeah. In Psalm 14, verse 1, the fool has said in his heart, there is no Elohim. They're corrupt, they have committed abominable deeds. There is no one who does good. You see, that term "you fool" that they're using here actually means you're saying that person doesn't know there's an Elohim, he doesn't believe he exists, and he hates his ways. You say that to your brother, you can't say that to your brother. Okay? You can't say that. Proverbs 1, verse 7, the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Verse in Proverbs 1:22, how long, O naive ones, will you love simplicity? Scoffers delight themselves in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge. And you know, it's you see these kind of arguments and battles go on over things like, when does the month start? Or how do you determine when the new year starts? Or whether or not the book of Enoch should be in the scriptures. And you know, people can have opinions. And if they want to disagree with us and be wrong, that's okay. It's okay. It says be righteous, not be right all the time. Verses 23 and 24, if therefore you are presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and present your offering. You know, above the tithe, men were to come and present offerings. Now that's above the tithe. Do that as they're able to Elohim 3 times a year. Deuteronomy 16, verses 16 and 17. 3 times in a year all your males shall appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and the feast of booths. They shall not appear before Yahweh empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you. Yeshua says, we're to be reconciled with our brother before we present our required offerings to the Father. We cannot be at peace with the Father and at odds with others who are chosen of the Father also. We can't do that. We can't do it. Verses 25 and 26. Make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you're with him on the way, in order that your opponent may not deliver you to the judge, and the judge to the officer, and you be thrown in prison. Truly I say to you, you shall not come out of there until you've paid the last cent. See, this passage is a continuation of the previous one. The Greek word for truly here is the Greek word amen, which means so be it. This is a paraphrase of Proverbs 25, verses 8 through 10. Do not go out hastily and argue your case. Otherwise, what will you do in the end when your neighbor puts you to shame? Argue your case with your neighbor. Do not reveal the secret of another, lest he who hears it reproach you, and the evil report about you not pass away. Yeshua says to settle your matter with your brother as soon as possible. Don't wait. Start now obeying his Torah by loving your neighbor. If we do not do that, we'll pay the penalty before the Father. And rightfully so. Verse 27 and 28. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks on a woman to lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. You know, Yeshua here in this particular passage, he says, everyone who looks on a woman with lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. The term, you know what he's really doing here? He's just teaching you the 10th commandment. What's the 10th commandment? You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his beasts, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now, the term covet in the Hebrew, it doesn't mean to want. Okay? That's what we're talking about, to want. To want or desire is not necessarily a bad thing. To want or desire something can make you just strive to work hard to get that car or that house like your neighbor has. What's wrong with that? But the Hebrew word for covet means to desire to the point of taking. Okay? To desire to the point of taking. And here, he says, first of all, you're talking about a married woman, because he says it's adultery. Now, I've heard it in Christianity over and over again. You can't look at a woman with lust. Well, there's a lot of pretty girls out there. Men, when they see a pretty girl, they try not to stare. They try not to look. And construction guys can't help but whistle. You know what? Men are wired that way. Not to be crude, but to look at a woman with desire. Okay? It's the same type thing that women have with babies. Okay? Women with babies, I've never understood. They're all, oh, look at the baby. Don't you want to hold the baby? I want to hold the little baby. No. Baby looks really good right with you in your arms. Okay? You look at all the women come around, let me hold the baby. Don't you just want to hold the baby? No. Men don't have, I like to hold a baby sometimes. That's fine. Mine, preferably. My grandkid, preferably. I don't want to hold the one that's squalling in the restaurant in the booth next to me. And then women, they'll squalling baby in the restaurant. Even the women will go, oh, so cute. See, but men, they don't have that. Well, there may be a little bit of that in there, but it's not like a woman. Okay? It's not like women have with these babies. And you have those two innate desires that Elohim has built into us. Okay? Those two innate desires, they're hardwired in here. Did women have to learn how to love babies? No. They come out of the chute that way. As soon as they start walking, what do they want? I want a baby doll. They want a little baby to hold. Interesting. Fascinating. Man, did you have to be taught to say, whoo, 13-year-old Susie, 13-year-old Bobby, and looks at 13-year-old Susie and says, my gosh, I just noticed. She's pretty. She doesn't have cooties anymore. Did he have to learn that? No. He's hardwired that way. It's just the way it is. And those two instincts that Elohim built into men, the desire for women, and for women, the love for babies, is what forms the nucleus of the family. Okay? That makes the nucleus of the family. That's what family comes together all around, those two instincts. The man's desire for the woman and the woman's love for her babies. That's where the family comes from. And that's not to be, it needs to be, like men, they're going to look at women. It doesn't mean to look and say, she's a pretty gal. The blonde in the blue and white striped blouse is a doll. That's my wife. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. Because most men don't say it, they'll think it. And that's the way it is. If, women try to look good. Men don't. Do we, Tom? Do we, David? We don't care. But,
As long as you don't plan on taking her home, right? You remember you talked about
exactly. As long as you don't desire to the point of taking, like David did Bathsheba. Okay? See, now if David had walked out on that porch of his palace and looked out there and said, "Ooh, someone's taking a bath on top of their house." Got his binoculars out and then put his binoculars away and said, "I think I'm going to have a drink and go to bed." That's not what he did, though. What did he do? He got his guards to say, "Fetch that gal up here." You see, when he just even made that plan to do that, he knew that wasn't his. He committed sin. Well, we read in Proverbs 6, starting at verse 23, "For the commandment is a lamp, and the teaching is light, and reproofs for discipline are the way of life, to keep you from evil, the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, nor let her catch you with her eyelids. For on account of a harlot one is reduced to a loaf of bread, and an adulteress hunts for the precious life. Can a man make fire in his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can a man walk on hot coals, and his feet not be scorched? So is the one who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her will not go unpunished." See, and he's talking about that fire burning inside, that they let burn. For your neighbor's wife, you can't do that. James tells us that when lust is conceived, it brings forth sin. Attraction to the opposite sex is natural, is not sin. I don't care what the Baptist preacher says. But we cannot let lust be conceived in our hearts to the point of us wanting to take what's not ours. James 1 verses 14 and 15 says, "But each one is tempted when he's carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. When sin is accomplished, it brings forth death." See, the way James words it is lust conceiving. That's what brings forth sin. Verses 29 and 30 of Matthew 5. "And if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. For it's better for you that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it's better for you that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to go to hell." You know, I've heard preachers for years say this passage, they say it's symbolic, it's not literal. Well, they use the example that virtually all men lust, therefore all men should be blind. Okay? Well, my point is, blind men lust too. Okay? You see, this is not a reference to your thought life. There's only one sin in all of Scripture that pertains to your thought life. Only one command. Just one. Thou shalt not covet. No other place in Scripture is your thought life a sin. Don't covet.
Brings envy, right?
No.
Desire.
Desire to the point of wanting to steal that which is not yours. Yeshua means what he says. If we can't keep from sin due to some obstacle, remove that obstacle regardless of what it is. That's what he's saying. Well, shoot. And I'm skipping, I'll have to read you verses 31 and 32. "And it was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the case of unchastity, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Well, Yeshua started telling us who will enter the kingdom of heaven and why. Then he talked about the importance of our relationship with our brother and spouse. Now he is focusing on the importance of keeping our covenants with one another. That is of the utmost importance. He's not really interested in discussing the details of divorce here. He's telling them the importance of a covenant. He just got through saying you're the salt of the earth. What did that mean? That means keep the covenant with the Father. Keep the covenant with one another. That's what we have to do. Elohim's words are forever. Our covenants with one another should be likewise. Yeshua brings this up again in Matthew 19. We'll get to it then. Elohim hates divorce. In Malachi 2, verses 15 and 16, "But no one has done so who has a remnant of the Spirit. And what did that one do while he was seeking a godly offspring? Take heed then to your spirit, and let no one deal treacherously against the wife of your youth. For I hate divorce, says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, and him who covers his garment with wrong, says Yahweh of hosts. So take heed to your spirit, that you do not deal treacherously. It's the breaking of a covenant. Paul makes the case that if an unbelieving spouse leaves, that person is no longer bound to that spouse. But once again, Yeshua is not teaching about adultery or divorce. He's telling us to keep our covenants with one another. Verse 33, again, you have heard the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to Yahweh. This is a quote from Leviticus 19, verses 11 and 12. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name, so as to profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yahweh. That says, don't lie to each other also. To make a false vow in his name is to take his name in vain, which is unforgivable. Deuteronomy 5:11, you shall not take the name of Yahweh your Elohim in vain, for Yahweh will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. That's your alleged unforgivable sin. We'll be talking about that later. Verses 34 through 36, but I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it's the throne of Elohim, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Well, we can nowadays. But it doesn't last. You have to keep redoing it. But we can't make an oath on heaven and earth or by Jerusalem because we don't own anything. We have nothing. You can't make an oath. You know that when we do that, we're making claims on things that aren't even ours. You can't even make an oath by your own head because we don't even have the ability to control the hair on our head, except on a temporary basis. So we're told we can't lie to one another. So what's the purpose of making an oath if you can't lie to one another? What's the purpose?
Why make it if you're going to lie?
Yeah, well, missing another verse. Verse 36, or verse 37, I mean. If you're, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil. If we're not allowed to lie, why should we make an oath upon things we have no control or that are not ours? All we're doing is either making claims that are a lie or we're blaspheming his name, which just compounds the sin. Follow your word. You say something, you do it. You say you're not going to do it, don't do it. If your yes should be as solid as anything. Your no should be as solid as anything. And verse 38, you've heard it said, heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, here he's quoting the Torah, and that's Leviticus 24, starting at verse 19. If a man injures his neighbor, just as he has done, so it shall be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Just as he has injured a man, so it shall be inflicted on him. Thus the one who kills an animal shall make it good, but the one who kills a man shall be put to death. This is a command in Torah. The guilty will pay their punishment. However, this has to take place in a court of law. Deuteronomy 19, starting at verse 15, a single witness shall not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin which he's committed. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed. If a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing, then both the men who have the dispute shall stand before Yahweh, before the priests and the judges who will be in office in those days, and the judges shall investigate thoroughly. If the witness is a false witness and he's accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him just as he had intended to do to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you. Now, Yeshua is going to speak about taking revenge on your brother coming up here. Verse 39, but I say to you, don't resist him who is evil. He's talking about a brother, okay, or sister. He's not talking about a criminal on the streets. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone wants to sue you, take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever shall force you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. This is not a treatise in self-defense. Telling us how to deal with a brother. You cannot take revenge on a brother. If he hits you, you can't hit him back. Okay? Romans 12, starting at verse 17. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of Elohim, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says Yahweh. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you'll heap burning coals upon his head. Talking about your brother, who this is referring to. Verse 42, give to him who asks of you, do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. That's the teaching of the Torah. Again, that's your people. That's his people. That doesn't mean the guy panhandling in the streets, or that guy you remember from high school will always bum money off of you and you never saw it again.
Or a con artist send you a letter wanting you to donate something.
Yep. Deuteronomy 15, starting at verse 7. If there's a poor man with you, one of your brothers, in any of your towns in your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, nor close your hand from your poor brother. But you shall freely open your hand to him, and shall generously lend to him sufficient for his need, in whatever he lacks. Beware lest there be a base thought in your heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of remission, is near. And your eye is hostile toward your poor brother, and you give him nothing. Then he may cry to Yahweh against you, and it will be a sin against you. You shall generously give to him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him. Because for this thing Yahweh your Elohim will bless you in all your work and in all your undertakings. For the poor will never cease to be in the land, therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy, and poor in your land. Verse 43. You've heard that it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, the teaching of, the Torah in that day was corrupted with traditions and Talmud nonsense. And the hate your enemy part is not in Torah. The whole treatise on the subject is one major passage in Torah. Leviticus 19, starting at verse 16, you shall not go about as a slanderer among your people, and you are not to act against the life of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. You shall not hate your fellow countrymen in your heart. You may surely reprove your neighbor, but you shall not incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. That's what he's talking about in this portion. Verse 44, but I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Now, the Ryrie Study Bible says, a new teaching found nowhere in the Old Testament. Well, in keeping in subject and not just phrase plucking, Yeshua is speaking of them who are his people. That's that Leviticus 19, starting at verse 16. See, your people, your neighbor, the sons of your people, your neighbor. That's who it's referring to. That's what it's speaking of. Your enemy. There have been people in this assembly that did not get along. Okay? Did not, for whatever reason, and they didn't like each other. That's okay. That's okay. We're not all going to like each other. We were raised different. We have different backgrounds, different cultures. Sometimes we tend to wear our feelings on our shirt sleeve too much. And then maybe someone's jerked on that shirt sleeve once too often, not whether intentionally or unintentionally. It's okay to not love someone, or not like someone, even to the point to where you consider them your enemy. But you're going to love your neighbor, regardless if they're your enemy or not. That's what has to happen. To say this teaching is not found in the Tanakh, like the Ryrie Study Bible says, is wrong. Proverbs 25, verses 21 and 22. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. For you'll heap burning coals on his head, and Yahweh will reward you. Did Ryrie not read his own Bible? Exodus 23, verses 4 and 5. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying helpless under its load, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall surely release it with him. That sounds like a lot of effort to go through for your enemy, doesn't it? Deuteronomy 22, starting in verse 1, you shall not see your countryman's ox or his sheep straying away, and pay no attention to them. You shall surely bring them back to your countryman. And if your countryman is not near you, or if you don't know him, then you shall bring it home to your house. It will remain with you until your countryman looks for it. Then you shall restore it to him. Thus you shall do with his donkey. You shall do the same with his garment. Shall do likewise with anything lost by your countryman, which is lost and you found. You're not allowed to neglect them. You shall not see your countryman's donkey or his ox fallen down on the way, and pay no attention to them. You shall surely help him to raise them up. See, to do those things, that's not doing them a favor. Oh, thank you for finding that and giving it back to me. That's so nice of you. No, it's not. That's the least you can do. Is that so difficult? No, it's the least you can do. That's a command. If you don't do it, you're playing with hellfire. I'm not saying that, I'm going to go to hell if I sin, but if it's in your heart to do those kind of things, to steal, and that's what it is, then there's a problem. We're to love our neighbor. Who's our neighbor? Yeshua told us it's the one following the Torah of the Father. Luke 10, starting at verse 25, says, behold, a certain lawyer stood up to him, put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, what's written in the Torah? How does it read to you? He answered and said, you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. He said to him, you've answered correctly. Do this and you'll live. They didn't teach me that in church. And continuing, but wishing to justify himself, he said to Yeshua, who's my neighbor? Yeshua replied and said, a certain man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him, and went off, leaving him half dead. And by chance a certain priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed by the other side. Likewise a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. And he came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. He put him on his own beast, brought him to an inn, took care of him. On the next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I'll repay you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be the neighbor to the man who fell on the robber's hands? And he said, the one who showed mercy toward him. Yeshua said, go and do the same. We're to love our brother. Who's our brother? Which one of those 3 followed the Torah of the Father? Which one of those 3 did?
The Samaritan.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
other guy shouldn't be a priest anymore if he's going to act like
Well,
that.
shouldn't. Or a Levite. But Mark 3, starting at verse 32, says, and a multitude was sitting around him, and they said to him, behold, your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you. And answering them, he said, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about on those who were sitting around him, he said, behold, my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of Elohim, he is my brother and sister and mother. That's your neighbor, the one who is obedient to the Torah of the Father. That's who we take care of. That's who, even if you're an enemy, you love them. Verses 44 of Matthew 5, we're about there. But I say to you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, in order that you may be sons of your Father who's in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax gatherers do the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what do you do more? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Some are going to disagree and how I see this passage, Yeshua is speaking of those among his people who are your enemies. That's what he's talking about. He's not telling us to pray for the enemies of Elohim. Okay? That's patently absurd. To pray for those that want a backpack full of explosives and have their kid wear it on your kid's school bus. That's ridiculous. And no, I'm not going to pray for them. The enemies that he's talking about are the ones that are his people that you don't get along with. You know, the catch here is, do we always know who's his and who isn't? Not always. It's not always easy to tell. You know, for instance, people you don't know very well. You don't know if they're Torah obedient or not. It's hard to tell. So, discretion. You don't keep the love, it says in Torah, to give among his people. Don't keep it too tight, because it may be some of his people that you don't know they are.
Well, those are the strangers among us.
The strangers among us, yeah. And there may be ones who have just wandered in among us and we didn't know it.
Maybe those that don't know the path of Torah
Yet, right? Yeah, that doesn't mean they're all of a sudden converted and are his. All of a sudden, you're either his or you're not. He knows us before we're born. Well, even the Gentiles greet their brothers that they love. If we have enemies amongst ourselves, I mean, how different are we from them? He says, therefore, you ought to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. We ought to be perfect, or the term also means complete, as our heavenly Father is perfect. That's a quote from the Tanakh. Leviticus 19, verse 2. Speak to all the congregation of the sons of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am holy. This quote comes from the passage in Torah from which Yeshua has been teaching. Leviticus 19, starting at verse 16. You shall not go about as a slanderer among your people, and you are not to act against the life of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. You shall not hate your fellow countryman in your heart. You may surely reprove your neighbor. You shall not incur sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. That's the heartbeat of this whole thing we've been on tonight. Right there. Any questions?